Hello guys, today we are going to learn how we can create a separate dedicated SAP HANA database on BTP, Business Technology Platform. So we are continuing our journey. As a part of our earlier video, we already created a basic CAP application. But when it comes to, okay, so let's just first understand why would we need a separate SAP HANA database. Okay. So when it comes to a concept of a modularization, okay, if I think of any of the application which are running these days would have a centralized database, right? Would have a centralized database as and this centralized database would be used going forward in n number of application. One application can be some sort of transactional application I can think of. Another one can be some sort of dashboard application I can think of. One can be some sort of analytical application which higher management might be using. So there can be n number of application that can work on the centralized set of data. Okay, for us to have such an n number of application working, we need a dedicated database that would support as a backend centralized data source. Okay, and that is where the concept of a centralized SAP HANA database would come into picture. Okay, so we created our first application, a CAP application, as a part of which we created a dedicated table in the backend service itself. Okay, but if I visualize, if I visualize a particular scenario where I do have a database, where I do have a database running separately compared to if I think of a scenario where I do have a common system, where I do have a common system, and as a part of which I do have a DB as well. Okay, and I do have a backend service running as well. Okay, so this I can consider as my DB, and this I can consider as my backend. Okay, and if this database is itself is storing all the data, then this I cannot consider a really good design, because I can say this is not a good design of backend application. Okay, instead, if I can have centralized database to which I can expect multiple such application which can connect it to, so this database would be going forward used as a part of this application, as a part of this application, n number of application which would need this data would be able to use that. Each application can connect to this database and can create, or let's just say can just refer to this database copy and can create only, or I can say can create a copy which would be just a connection to actual DB. Okay, so what we are going to do over here is we are going to build a SAP HANA database which would be a centralized database, and in our upcoming videos we would be connecting this database with n number of such transactional dashboard analytical application that we would be creating and deploying on the cloud. Okay, so to uh, have this motive satisfied, to have the basics, to have the basic database that we would need for our application to run up and running, let's just start with the database creation. So as discussed earlier, we would again be going with a same development tool. We are using SAP Business Application Studio over here that can be logged in via SAP BTP that you might have already seen in one of my earlier video. Okay, so if I want to create a project, so what sort of project I'll be going with? I'll be creating a project from a template, and that would be dedicated SAP HANA database. So as you can see, I just selected as a project a new project from a template, I'll just scroll down and I'll just select a HANA database project. I'll just go next and I can give any name of the project. But as you might also be following me already, that the naming convention plays a very important role. So what I'll be doing is I'll be saying I am going to create a database module on my BTP, and that would be for all the material masters 11 data. So let's just name it as a BTP DBMM. I'll just go next. I'll just name the default module as a DB. Go next. Here, when I think of a database, okay, when I think of a database, what all thing a database can contain? A database can contain n number of, okay, so internally a database can contain, I can say, table, it can contain a view, it can contain multiple roles, it can contain some sort of capability using which history can be maintained, or in terms of HANA, I can say system versioning. All the things can a database contain. Okay. And all this thing should be tied up somewhere, should be linked somewhere to that database, and that is what we can call it as a schema. Okay, so I'll just name the schema of this database as a BTP. For example, I'll just say DB schema. So that would be responsible for containing all the data of relevant procedures. We can connect to a cloud foundry, but let's just learn another way around rather than following the wizard, how from the command line as well we can connect to the cloud foundry. That's what we would be seeing. That's why let's just avoid this for now. I'll just say finish. Okay, so as you can see, the workspace would get reloaded the moment the project starts created. Okay, so as you can see, I do have my DB project created. Okay, as a part of which, what all things I do have? A project, a multi-target application file, MTA file. Now let's just open what all things does it contain. It contains two things. Okay, it contains two things. It contains set of modules that it does have. Modules, you can think of a set of folders or a set of sub processes that this DB would be serving. So it is serving a purpose of a database. That's what you can see over here. And it contains a resource. When I say resource, what is a resource? For me to bake a cake, I would need its multiple ingredients, right? Same way, for a database process to work, it would need a container which can store the actual, or I can say real data. That is what I can think of a resource. So this is my resource. This is a nothing but a data container. Okay, so let's just follow some sort of naming convention for us to identify it uniformly, because we would be creating plenty of application in our as a part of our project requirement. So I'll just name it as, let's just say, for example, HDI, BTP, DB, and MM. So it is a nothing but you can think of a HDI container, a data container for a BTP DB MM process. Now, as I mentioned, for bake a cake, I would need ingredients. Same way, for a module, for a process to work, it would need resources. So these resources would be specified as a requires over here in the relevant process. So if I am renaming a resource, the same should also be reflected over here. So that's what I just did. And I'll just also rename the name of the process, saying this is database process of my and this is what this particular project would be responsible for that. Okay, we would be coming back to this MTFIML file when we would be working on the deployment part as well. But now let's just jump onto the DB. So it contains a SRC folder. As a part of which we would be having all the source that we would be creating. So for example, I want to create the table. I want to create certain views as well. So if I just go into the table, I can start creating my first table. So what I'll do is I'll just say right click, new file. Here you can combine your all the tables as a part of certain namespaces. So I can say btp underscore mm dot product. So as a part of mm process, I do have a product table. Okay. So I can just say, okay. So just renaming this. Okay, let's just start from the scratch. So all the files that we are going to create as a part of HANA should have a dedicated extension. So what I'll do is instead of creating an file without an extension, I'll just say btp underscore mm dot product dot hdb table. HDB says stands for all the HANA database artifact. Okay, so I'll be just creating HDB table over here, and I can see it appearing over here. Now I want to create a table. So you remember our old golden college days? How I can create a table? How we used to create a table? We used to specify its list of properties and everything. List of columns. Exactly. Same way we would be going over here. We would be saying column. As we know, HANA is a columnar database. So we would be creating a column table over here whose name would be btp underscore mm product. And now we would be specifying it's all the property that we are interested in. So for example, I need a product ID, which would be of, for example, 36 character. Then I would need a name of a particular product. That what is that product? So I can again name it as a, for example, 50 character. Then I want to categorize the product. So I can say a category of it. I can again say let make it 50 character for now. I want to give some sort of logs saying who created that, who is the person who last did the changes and everything. So what we can do is I can have certain fixed properties. I can say created at, for example, and the created at would be nothing but a timestamp which would contain the full timestamp when the product got created. When the product just got created, a new entry got created, technically saying, into the database. When this let's just say who is the person who created this particular table, that's who created this particular entry, who inserted this product into the database. So I can say created by, and let's just say it's nothing but an varchar 255. So as you might have observed, in the CAP project, we are going with all the string integer kind of database. And here, all the database, all the data type that we are going to use, that we are using over here are SQL data type. So these are SQL data types. I can say n varchar, or example, you can say control space, and you would be able to figure out that I want an integer. You can find a integer over here. If you want a date, you can find a date over here. So this is proposing you all the particular possible SQL data type that you can use. Okay, so last one I'll be just specifying it as a modified by, I can say n varchar 255 again. Now, what a table should also contain additionally? Yes, a primary key. I can say a primary key. So what is a key over here? I can say ID is something that I would be keeping always uniform. Okay, we would be learning how I can keep a ID very uniform, but this ID, let's just consider for now as a primary key. So I just created an ID column as a primary key over here. Now we do have a table. Now I want to create a view on top of that. You might be thinking, what is the purpose of a view? So view is ideally created so as to keep the database fully secure. Always have a practice of not exposing the table directly to the world outside. Don't make it usable. Instead, create a view which would be exact replica of that of the table, and this would be used going forward by all the application whoever is willing to use that. So the table would be secured centrally. In case I do have a requirement of creating a view which is made out of multiple table, I can also do that. Okay. but always try to create a view. Okay. So I can say BTP views, and here I am saying whenever I am creating a view which is directly getting the data from a table, and it's the only table, it's a version 1 view of the particular table, I can name it as a VV1 product. So there is a naming convention, a suggestible naming convention you can follow. You can say HDB view. So there is an extension which this file should be having. I can just copy this name. Now I do have the view. I am in the file. I can say view this. Now as, when I say as, I get a chance to select all the column which I am willing to. So I'll be selecting all the column from my database table. And here I'll be specifying all the columns which I can say ID, name, category, created at, created by, modified at, and modified by. And I can terminate the statement over here with the semicolon. So semicolon would be something that you would be using in any SQL word as a delimiter. So I do have a table, I do have a view, right? Now think of one more design pattern. Okay, I do have a centralized database. I do have a transactional application working as a part of it. I do have a dashboard application. For example, consider this as my, consider this particular application. Second, yeah, consider this application as my transactional one, and consider this another application as my, let's just say, dashboard application. Now if this particular application is willing to use my database artifact, what I can expect, that they might end up doing some sort of modification in the database entries. They would need a authorization using which they would be able to perform the create, update, delete on the database entries. Whereas when I think of a particular application dashboard, I can expect it to perform any sort of read or query operation only, right? So how I can control to which application what sort of authorizations I should be granting, right? For that, we do have one more component into my data module called roles. So here I'll be going and I'll be creating certain roles. Okay. Those roles would be responsible for granting the create, or I can say in terms of database, I can think of a insert, update, delete privileges to the dedicated application user. So if I just go over here, I can think a roles folder. I can just say right click and let's just create certain roles. One for example, a read only. So whichever application does have this role should be able to read the information. I'll just say HDB role. Same way. So let's just close this for now. I'll just create one more role, for example, which is nothing but a write.hdb role. You might be observing that all the table or all the views or all the roles, in brief, all the database artifacts, name, or let's just say extensions are starting with a .hdb something. So this .hdb says this is a HANA database artifact. Okay, so we do have a write role as well. I'll just say okay. I'll just create this. Based on the network speed, many a time you might face some sort of connection lag because BAS, Business Application Studio, is a remote SDK. Now, let's say I want to create a read-only role. So I'll just say right click over here. and I'll just say open with and code editor. Okay, sorry, it just opened something else because of this connection lag. Just say right click, open with and code editor. So it just opened me the relevant role in a particular code editor. Now, follow the step which would be required to create a right set of rule. Okay, there would be a purely role maintained in a form of some sort of JSON you can think of. If you see, yeah. Okay, so over here, if you just say double inverted comma, you would be getting the value help saying it is a role, the first component, that's what it should be containing. You can create a parenthesis and you are directly getting a proposal that you should be giving a name to the role. So for example, I am saying BTP MM, it is a process. I am specifying a read only role. So this specification of column is not a naming convention, but try to follow this in order to recognize between multiple roles, because today you are only having your first HANA database. You would be creating plenty of them depending on your project requirement. If you just say control space, you would be getting object privileges. Here we would be specifying what all privileges we want to grant to which particular artifact, right? So as I mentioned earlier, don't go with a tables exposure. Instead, always try to follow one expose the view itself. So I can say I want to expose this particular view. Okay, so what I can do over here is I can specify all the component which I want to give the privileges for. So in the curly bracket, I'll just specify name. Here you would be specifying the name of component you copied. Here in the type, internally it is a version 1 view which is directly connecting to the table. So here at a role level, you have to specify a table, because a view is nothing but a set of columns which would be giving the data per record. So internally it's a table structure. Okay, then you have to specify privileges, and here you would be specifying, if it's a read only role, what sort of privileges I should be granting only for selecting the data. That's what I am giving right now. Okay, you can just copy the same role and try to enhance the privileges in the right role. So for example, I want to create a right role over here, which would be responsible. Any application which consume this role would be capable of executing more than just select operations. So I can say select, insert, update, and delete. That's what we can perform on the database. So these all the operations or application which would be consuming this right role would be able to perform. Okay. Now, many a time you might also have observed that I do have a centralized database which is being consumed by a dashboard application. Well and good. It is also being consumed by transactional application. But this transactional application would have its internal database. Definitely it won't be storing, but it might have created some sort of component which would be manipulating the data in the way it wants. And sometime some other application might also find it useful, saying there is one more transactional application which is finding the finding the kind of database artifact this application has created. Okay, so I can say there is a trans2 application, transactional second transactional application, or you can think of any sort of dashboard or anything. So if this transactional application has certain database component as a part of which, as a part of its particular data container, and the another application is also willing to use it, then rather than connecting to this DB, they might also think of directly using this particular application as their data source. Okay, and if they start doing that, they would also be able to see all the component which this DB is exposing. Now if someone tries to use the actual database component, actual database tables which are generated as a part of DB via this application, okay, this application may or may not have the sufficient privileges to grant the authorization, or you can say pass on the authorizations, okay, to the another consuming application. Okay, for that we have to generate certain rule if we want to create any design as a part of which we want the consuming application also to enable the granting of those role to further level. I can say read only access, but with a grant privileges. If I want to create such a role, I can create such a role. So the file does not have a specific naming convention that needs to be followed, but there are certain rule which would be required. For example, if I just say open with code editor over here, I'll just copy the read only role from here, paste it over here, and here the name of the role, if it is having privileges with grant option, it should have a hash along with the name of the role. This is very mandatory thing that should be there. So okay, 1 second, it is taking some sort of lag. Business Application Studio. Yeah, so I just appended a hash over here, and this privileges that we have over here at line number 8, I'll be changing it to privileges with grant option. Okay, so going forward, whichever application is having this particular role as a part of it would be able to grant these privileges to the upcoming application who is willing to consume that transactional applications database, or I can say any sort of dashboard, any non-DB applications database. Even if they are willing to use, they can use this. Same way, let's just also create one more role for granting the right privileges. I can say right click, new, write with a grant privileges. I'll just open this particular file with a code editor. Just close this, go over here, try to copy this, paste it over here, add a hash along with the name, and change these privileges. You have to change the privileges to the privileges plus grant option. Okay. So we are able to generate 4 roles which are responsible for granting any consuming application read or write role, or read or write role along with the grant privileges. So here we are able to create our first SAP HANA database with a which is containing a table and a role and the views. Okay. Now this is something that we do have as a part of this video. In the upcoming video, I'll be showing you how this application can be deployed on the Cloud Foundry, on the BTP, and how I can visualize, how I can view the schema that we just created with the table and the view. Okay. So this is all that we do have this for this particular video. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe. And hoping to see you all in my upcoming video. Okay. Thank you so much.